Good afternoon, Bahamas. I'm Nicole, and we are coming to you live from our ZNS studios here in Freeport, Grand Bahama, and we are continuing our coverage. We begin with the latest update on Tropical Storm Nicole with Chief Meteorologist Siobhan Moxie Bonamy. Siobhan, we understand that the storm has just made landfall in Abaco. Kind of give us the latest update right now as it relates to this storm.
Thank you, Renico, and good evening, good day, Bahamas. Yes, at around noon today, Tropical Storm Nicole made landfall near Marsh Harbor. At present, the islands of Grand Bahama and Abaco remain under a hurricane warning, and the island of Bimini is now under tropical storm warning. As of 1 p.m., Tropical Storm Nicole was about 15 miles to the west of Marsh Harbor, about 10 miles south of Treasure Key, 40 miles to the east of McLeanstown, 90 miles east of Freeport, about 105 miles to the east of West End Grand Bahama, and about 135 miles east-northeast of Bimini. Nicole continues to move toward the west at about 12 miles per hour and has maximum sustained winds near 70 miles per hour. However, we do anticipate additional strengthening as it relates to Nicole, and it is forecast to become a hurricane as it's crossing east and central Grand Bahama later this afternoon. Right now, the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama continues to experience sustained tropical storm force winds. However, we do anticipate for Grand Bahama in particular, we should begin experiencing some low-end hurricane force winds or possibly hurricane gusts as Nicole approaches and perhaps strengthens just a little to hurricane.
Okay, and you mentioned that there will be some additional strengthening for Grand Bahama. At what time? Because earlier today at the AOC, you may have mentioned that we are expecting it to become a hurricane or low Cat 1 hurricane at around 3 or 4 o'clock. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that still seems to be the case. As Nicole tracks to the west, the eye seems to be coming. There seems to be a formation of an eye as it's coming to the west of Abaco. So it wouldn't surprise me if at the 4 p.m. update that Nicole is now, become a hurricane.
For residents in Abaco, what are they experiencing right now?
The last I spoke with Abaco, they are having extreme gusty winds and heavy rainfall. And that is not uncommon because their center has more or less passed them now, so they should be in the north and eastern eye wall. So the residents in Abaco should be experiencing wind gusts anywhere between 50 to 60 miles an hour and heavy rainfall as well. The wind should now be coming from the southeast, and that is going to continue to pull water onshore. So residents are to remain indoors because even though the eye has passed, or the center, I should say, has passed to the west of the island, we're still having that onshore flow, and water is going to continue to pile over those coastal areas along the eastern shoreline. So for the remainder of this evening, Abaco residents should be experiencing gusty winds and squally rain bands as Nicole continues to the west.
Okay, we have on the screen some video of Abaco from residents who are experiencing the impacts of this tropical storm at the moment. Also, joining me live now in studio is the president of Creative Works, Peter Adderley, and we had a chance to speak earlier, Peter, and we were talking about the flood that Abaco is currently experiencing, and you were mentioning, for an island that just experienced Hurricane Dorian and now having to experience this type of flooding now, and you were feeling for them.
Yeah, a number of the homes are still compromised, obviously, by way of Dorian, and to get this type of water at this point could only be devastating for many families, I would imagine. I'd want to have the meteorologist speak to the width and the size of this hurricane. It seems to be having some multiple impacts in different places.
Well, overall, in terms of wind field, the wind field of Tropical Storm Nicole is very vast. It's over 300 miles, particularly under northern quadrant. So I guess you can say top heavy. And that has been piling and continually piling water toward the north coast of Grand Bahama, as well as it was approaching Abaco. It has been piling water toward the north and central Abaco coast, and hence along with king tide and of course battering waves and swells, there are so many hazardous factors that have come into play as Nicole made its approach to Abaco. One of the things with the islands, you know, they are sort of narrow, and many of them are very flat. So that will be that has been an issue with water overtopping those seawalls and stuff, and hence you have that coastal flooding there in North Abaco, and I'm sure there is some minor coastal flooding as well, like in the area of Sandy Point, because they would have had a northerly and northwesterly flow. So probably Moores Island and Sandy Point as well may have had minor, not compared to what North Abaco had, but I'm sure those like Green Turtle Key and those islands to the east of Abaco as well would have been bombarded by storm surge coming in.
I think the speed and the movement could become advantageous too if she just hits and runs.
Right. Well, she really is sort of hitting and running, because it was moving at about 9-10 last night, and it's now up to 12. So hopefully it will continue to go forward in that speed, and that will help reduce the amount of water that will pile up, you know, especially like now for Grand Bahama, where the north coast is very, very vulnerable to storm surge flooding.
Right. Do you expect an increase in speed, or this will continue throughout?
You mean the 12?
For the storm, from 12 miles per hour.
Yeah, for the most part it should be 12. Maybe it might bump up to about 13. But the average speed more or less should hold at this point going to the west at about 12 miles an hour.
And for the island of Bimini, I saw persons on the live asking if they're still under a tropical storm watch as the storm progresses and moves into Grand Bahama.
Bimini is under a tropical storm warning. We removed Bimini from hurricane warning because we anticipate most of the associated winds in terms of hurricane strength to be north of them. So hence we bring them into a tropical storm warning. But Bimini is experiencing tropical storm, low-end tropical storm winds sustained at the moment, and those winds will continue to ramp up as Nicole Center approaches, especially the city of Freeport and then on to West End, because West End and Bimini is almost on the same longitude.
Now I know that this all-clear call becomes critical. If you're in Abaco, you're eager to see what took place overnight, which just happened a few hours ago. Are they okay to come outside and take a look? They certainly shouldn't be driving around, I imagine.
No, Abaco residents should be indoors because they are still experiencing the eastern portion or the eastern eye wall associated with Nicole, as well as outer bands as Nicole continues to move to the west. Those tropical storm force winds should be hanging around Abaco up to sunset this evening. You know, so I would admonish the residents of Abaco, particularly now that we have all that flooding along the roadways and stuff, you should really remain indoors. And then, of course, that makes the vegetation, trees and those susceptible. So any winds they can topple. You don't want to be on the road. Right now, if you're in Abaco, you want to stay indoors.
We do have our reporter Shane Stubbs live in Abaco with the latest. We do know he has some guests standing by, so we're going to go over to Shane. Shane, what can you tell us? What's happening on the ground in Abaco right now?
That's right, Remiko. I'm here reporting live at the Bahamas Government Complex here in Central Abaco, where it seems as though we are on the final leg of Tropical Storm Nicole. Joining me right now is the administrator for Central Abaco and Hopetown, Mr. Donald Rowe. Mr. Rowe, tell us a little bit about what you've been hearing from Abaconians during this time.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, the Bahamas. Abaco is buckled down at this time, as the reporter said, that the IF passes over, and we are now at the back end of Hurricane Nicole. So Abaco has buckled down in those shelters. The shelters occupied. We have 3 shelters. We had 2 official shelters. We had to open up an additional shelter. But Abaconians had heed to the warning of the Med Office and the local officials here in Abaco.
You mentioned having to open another shelter. You know, what does that mean, you know, about the Abaconians taking this thing very seriously? I
think what we have noticed is that Abaconians learned from the effects of the Hurricane Dorian, and they really don't want to make that same mistake they made in 2019.
All right, and as we head into, you know, to this final part of this storm, what what kind of warning do you have for Abaconians, anyone who wants to go out there and drive and sightsee at this time? What warning do you have for them?
I pleading to all Abaconians and everyone within the sound of my voice, especially those islands that are affecting by Hurricane Nicole, just stay inside until the Med Office and NEMA have give the all clear. So once again, just ride out the storm inside and just be careful as you traverse through these streets after the all clear has been done.
If you heard of any, let's talk about a little bit about evacuation. Some people decided to leave. Have you heard of any recent evacuations at this point in time?
Not at this time. Everyone heeded to the call and was evacuating as requested.
All right. Well, there you have it. The warning has gone out. Everyone in Abaco, please stay safe. If you don't have to come out, please do not come out. Reporting on behalf of my cameraman, reporting live here in Central Abaco, I'm Shane Stubbs. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Shane. You and Roger continue to remain safe over there in Abaco. We heard from one of the administrators just now mentioning that they are now in the back end. When can they expect to go from hurricane watch to tropical storm warning?
Well, we anticipate that we will perhaps move Abaco out of the hurricane warning maybe at 4 o'clock. Once those hurricane conditions no longer exist or seem to be a threat to Abaco, then we would go ahead and drop them out of that hurricane warning. So I would not be surprised if at 4 o'clock we don't move them out of that. But we will keep them in a tropical storm warning because, like I said, tropical storm conditions are still expected to continue into sunset this evening.
So just a few more hours, Abaconians, just hang in there. We're getting through this together. Peter, you got a lot of friends and family over there in Abaco.
Yeah.
I'm sure your phone has been ringing off the hook since this thing started.
I mean, we've seen the flooding.
Yeah.
There's no reports or any indication of loss of life, maybe some damages to property. We got to count it a blessing that they may truly be on the tail end, considering what they went through for Dorian. I think it's good news to know that it's just been a lot of water, some heavy winds. Like I said, certainly there's some residential damages. Nothing major has been reported, so hopefully we can keep it that way. The worst thing can happen is you can cause some more harm on yourself by coming outside before you get the all clear. So Abaconians, at this point, we can count our blessings, and hopefully everybody would listen to the directives of the meteorologists and the officials, stay inside, let this storm pass, and they can get on with their lives to make whatever recovery efforts that are necessary.
Does this storm set the island back in any way in terms of rebuilding? As we know, they're still in the recovery phase since Hurricane Dorian, but does this set them back in any way?
No doubt, and the pace of recovery was going extremely fast in Marsh Harbor. I mean, you go through the settlements, only in small spots there was still some signs of Dorian. I mean, they did a good job at the private airport section, the main airport. A lot of businesses are back up and running. And so, I mean, it was tremendous to see, particularly the second homeowners in Guanakee and Hopetown. They got in there immediately after and started to rebuild. It's still one of the more popular and fastest growing economies in the country. And so we counted a blessing that they've only had a short stint of Nicole. And again, you just want them to stay inside, remain safe so there's no bodily harm and there's no vehicle accidents or whatever. But I think a tremendous job was done in the recovery of Dorian. No doubt Nicole will give a bit of a setback. But the spirit, the resilience, and the drive of the people in Abaco, it's just incredible.
Absolutely. Now, Tropical Storm Nicole made landfall in Elbow Key today around 12 noon. That's Grand Key, which is also under the gun. We spoke to one of the administrators there as well, and we're now going to go to that report.
That tree is like a pillar in this community. I mean, it's like a foundation. That tree's been there forever. We call it, he usually call it the gossip tree. Yeah, and that actually has been taken down already. And we haven't got the whole full brunt of the storm yet.
Now, although all of the team has carried out all of the storm preparations yesterday, today preparations have been fine-tuned, in particular with boats in the harbor.
Picked up. It's now about 36 miles per hour. The sea is very choppy. We have off and on rain. Both of our centers, the Gateway Gymnasium and the Louise McDonald High School, they are in operation. So far, we have one person in the shelter, and we still bracing for the worst. Everything is still in place today. There was only two that was not secured, but they are still in position where they were yesterday. So they're still in where they were stocked yesterday. So everything is in order now.
That was the administrator for the island of Bimini, Desiree Ferguson. Bimini being an island surrounded by deep water, I'm sure it is good news for them that they're not experiencing the full effect of this storm, Siobhan.
Yes, that is definitely good news for Bimini because, like you said, they're surrounded by water and the islands are pretty much small islands. So the fact that it will appear Nicole will continue that west and then start to take a more west-northwest track spells good news for the residents of Bimini.
Peter, I'm sure you would have heard from some residents from Bimini as well.
You know, they've been having such a terrific tourism season.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of guests are still on the island. The last thing they needed was to get a big bang from Nicole. And so hopefully it stays in a path away from Bimini and those residents can carry on with their normal life.
What kind of impact do these storms have on the tourism, especially on those family islands like Bimini and Abaco?
Well, if you get damage to infrastructure, then you have a problem, because then you start talking about the main infrastructure like airports. If people can't come in, then you have a problem. If your docks are being destroyed by hurricanes, then, you know, Bimini is the gateway to the country. There's a lot of ships and boats that come in and out of there. And then you talk about the facilities, lodges and hotels and motels and the Airbnbs. If they're destroyed, then people have nowhere to stay. Right. And so you'd rather have no hurricanes at all, but you know, it's an annual event to have hurricane season in the Bahamas.
Yes.
You just can only hope for the best and have a quick recovery as possible, because the economy, it's the bread and butter of the way people livelihoods are held. And so it seems as if Nicole is not so bad a girl at this point. I mean, but you never know.
Absolutely. Well, we invite you to call into our show at 351-9774 for those of you that are watching, and also we can see your comments on Facebook stream, and so we invite you to stay tuned. But as I mentioned earlier this morning, we checked in with the Family Island Administrator Deidre Fox in the Berry Islands. Fox and her team were kept busy yesterday ensuring that the necessary preparations have been completed, and she gives us this update.
Here in the Berry Islands, we are experiencing scattered showers intermittently with high winds. Residents have prepared their property and shopped for grocery items and filled their medications at the clinic. And the gas station was also busy. No one entered the shelter at the Church of God of Prophecy, which was activated yesterday at 9 a.m. Flamingo Air has postponed flights until further notice. And the Berry Islands is on high alert. But nobody is driving around the streets. Everybody, I guess, taking advantage of this cool morning. But all preparations are in place. The ambulance is actually parked at the shelter. And we are just awaiting any possibility. We are ready for it. The residents in the Berry Islands are taking this very seriously. There's so many inlets and waterways here, and persons have done everything. They have shopped, they have prepared their residences and their place of where they live, wherever they are, but they're ready.
We understand that there are some 900 residents in the Berry Islands, and Administrator Fox says all of them have worked together to complete hurricane preparations. It's certainly good to hear from the residents of Berry Island because they have been a part of this, just as Bimini and Abaco and us here in Grand Bahama. And so, but we didn't get much of an update on what kind of impact that Berry Islands is having from this storm. Siobhan, give us a little update on that.
Well, Berry Islands was just on the south fringes of the tropical storm force wind, so they probably experienced some tropical storm wind gust, and probably will continue to experience that as the system Nicole goes by to our west. However, most of the islands would have experienced ocean swells. So I'm sure just like New Providence had some kind of coastal inundation, it's more than likely that Berry Islands would have had coastal inundation because of ocean swells. And that will lead to beach erosion and possibly some coastal flooding along roads that may traverse those islands.
Okay, and Peter, as of the other family islands, I'm sure you would have heard from residents of Berry Islands.
You know, there's this fine line, and meteorologists know this better than anybody else. There's this fine line between relaxation and anticipation. You hear the meteorologist say around 4 p.m., and you always think you have that 1 hour to go see a family member. A shopkeeper gets a bit ambitious and wants to stay open a little longer. You want to go and get that last bit of food or another bottle of vodka or something, and you just never know.
Right.
And so the Berries were between that fine line. Well, they're not really calling our names, so maybe we're not in the path at all. And then you get relaxed,
right.
But lo and behold, you get some wind, some water, and then there is some impact.
Right.
And so for the most part, the administrator has done an excellent job. The officials have kept people posted, and people seem to have followed the directions and have been safe.
And at this point, are they still under the warning? Berry Islands.
No, they're not under. They're not under the warning as far as the last alert came out. New Providence, Eleuthera, Andros, and I believe the Berry was removed from warning, from tropical storm warning. Only Bimini, I believe, at this time is under tropical storm warning, with Abaco and Grand Bahama under hurricane warning.
Okay, so that's certainly good news. We are. The northern Bahamas is getting out of the thick of it, but Grand Bahama is still under the radar as this storm progresses and moves here. Now, we saw some footage earlier from, as reporters went out in the southern district. We also went into the western district, and we saw some flooding. What can you tell us about that from a weather perspective?
Well, with regard to, I know that there are some street flooding along the Bayshore Road of West End. And that is not, we expected that because the northerly and northeast winds continually coming ashore toward West End would have pushed water continuously toward that road. And so eventually it would have piled up and then overtoppled the seawall that traverses along the coast of the Bayshore Road in West End. Hopefully the community of West End, and particularly those who live near that road, would have moved at least further inland to perhaps the road on the south side, or otherwise move toward a shelter, because that is going to continue to be overtoppled as the Nicole continues to move to the west. Bearing in mind, we're going into high tide at 8:18 this evening. So that will definitely lift the water an additional 4+ feet on top of any surge.
Wow.
So those in West End should, heed their advice of their local authorities and either move further toward the south side or try to get to a shelter, because the coastal flooding will continue along that road.
Let's switch back to the east for a second, where it's going to hit early. McLean's town, I think the majority of persons were evacuated yesterday. There were some 9 people left behind, so we keep them in our thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely.
And hopefully they're in safe quarters in McLean's town when they take that hit from Nicole and it works its way up to the Freeport and into West End. McLean's town, the last thing McLean's town needs now is a full bang hurricane. Again,
Is anything at this point?
you covered, you did an in-depth and excellent story in the entire East. And, you know, McLeanstown took a banging.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping for those 9 persons that stayed behind, they stay in safe quarters. And, of course, the anticipation of those who moved out, they want to know what's going to be happening back home when they go there Thursday or Friday.
Right. You mentioned it. We do know there's quite a bit of persons that were evacuated and are currently in the shelters in East Grand Bahama, but a number of persons that remain behind in Sweetings Key. Siobhan, what kind of conditions is Sweetings Key experiencing at this moment? And as the storm progresses more towards Grand Bahama, how will those conditions worsen?
Well, we've had several outer rain bands passing the Sweetings Key and eastern Grand Bahama, and those will continue to come until Tropical Storm Nicole passes, and then behind Nicole will still be more rain bands. And contained in those rain bands are extreme strong gusty winds. In addition to the sustained winds that will be surrounding Nicole as she makes her track to the west. So hopefully those who stayed behind in Sweetings Key, and I really would hope that there's no one there, would seek higher ground because you as well will be getting overtopping of water coming along the island. Now, I know that Sweetings Key is a slightly bit elevated, slightly. So hopefully that will be enough to keep the water at bay coming across. But one of the things that has not helped was the fact that during 2019, you know, most of the mangrove was taken out. And so that has made the coast areas even more vulnerable to water coming in because mangroves are your first line of defense.
Yeah.
And then with them being so badly damaged as a result of Dorian, that makes the communities in the east very much more vulnerable.
We can only hope that the 12 miles per hour, 13 miles per hour that may get to, that becomes a saving grace so that it's a touch and go. And if you get a touch and go, you know, obviously you're better off. You don't want it to sit over you and then just bang away.
Which Dorian did.
Dorian did.
Right.
Well, thankfully, this is not Dorian.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Nicole is going to continue moving.
And Nicole is a hit and run girl. I like her.
Even if I have to push her along myself.
I think the entire Northern Bahamas would join you in pushing everybody. But we have a caller that called in just a few moments ago and wanted to know, how safe is Bimini?
Bimini overall in the grand scheme of things should be okay. Like I said, because of the tropical storm force winds that Bimini will have, again, water will still pile. So you will still have that minor coastal flooding. I know that some of the streets in North Bimini can be low and, you know, the water can funnel through. So I think for the most part, Bimini should be okay because thankfully the stronger winds, even with the system, is north of the center. So the center itself, the center itself will pass north of Bimini, and then the greater impact is north of the center.
Okay.
So more or less they are what we'll call the weaker part of the storm as it's going by, so that's a plus.
Self-discipline is always a key because the geographical makeup of Bimini, you're talking about 2 small streets, 7 miles, and ocean to your left and ocean to your right. So self-discipline, meaning staying inside, could save any potential damage in Bimini.
Absolutely. One of the comments on the Facebook stream, still waiting to hear about Ocean Key and Cat Key. They're just off Bimini and also surrounded by ocean. Persons wanting to know what kind of, I guess, weather conditions are they experiencing right now, Ocean Key and Cat Key?
Just like Bimini, Cat Key is slightly southwest of Bimini. And so they will be experiencing, they'll be right on the outer fringe. It's almost like what Barry Island is, right on that cusp of the tropical storm winds. So mostly they will get tropical storm gusts and not sustained tropical storm force winds. So that's a good thing. But again, because the duration of the wind coming from one direction tend to be for such a long period of time, you will definitely have water pushing toward those coasts. But again, those should be minor coastal flooding. And once you remain indoors, everyone should be okay.
And you know, with Cat Key, you have significant number of second homeowners.
Right.
And so the hope is that there was sufficient notice where they themselves and they made contact with persons there to help make some preventative conditions to look after, whether it's their boats, their homes, and any possible piece of property that they wanted to be secured.
Right. Let me get back to on West End. You mentioned something very interesting that I think many persons didn't consider. With the king tide, as you mentioned, and the tide being at least 4 inches above,
4 feet.
4 feet above regular tide. That's interesting to know. So those residents will experience significant flooding.
Well, the good thing, well, good is relative, but the center of Nicole should be very near West End at around the time of high tide. The plus to that is the wind at that point should be coming more west or slightly, it's more or less paralleling the south coast of West End instead of a more onshore flow. So that will help them slightly in terms of not lifting the water level so much. But because we will still be at a high tide and the waves will still be overtopping, then you will still have that flooding going on along that Bayshore Road. But I don't think it will be significantly greater than it is at this point.
I don't want to demise the seriousness of what could potentially happen in the West End. What's most important to me is by Sunday, banana pancake and fish is available. So whatever Nicole has to do, she needs to do and get out of the way.
Get out of the way quickly.
No harm done, and let's get on with it.
Absolutely. Well, as we mentioned, tonight we want to remind you of the emergency operating numbers for the island of Grand Bahama. They are 351-4902, 351-4903, 351-4904. For the island of Abaco, you can call 827-3093, and Bimini, you can dial 456-2644 or 4. Up the screen. Make sure that you put that back on the screen for the residents of Abaco to get that number. Additionally, we want to hear from you. If you have any pictures or videos that you would like to share on the impact of Hurricane Nicole, or Tropical Storm Nicole rather, you can WhatsApp it to 727-0842, and you can also call in at 352-9774. That's 351-9774, and we will most certainly give you credit for those pictures. We did get a lot of pictures coming in today from residents throughout the island experiencing this storm. We didn't have much yesterday, but today a lot of persons are taking pictures and sending it and making sure that we're able to show and people can see throughout the Bahamas the kind of conditions that they're experiencing as a result of this storm, and so they don't take this lightly.
Right, multiple areas, Hopetown, Cooperstown, Marsh Harbor, they showed lots of stuff from there. Few people in the east, so I don't think we're going to see much from there, but hopefully no harm, no foul. Like I said, 12 miles per hour, 13 miles per hour, that's normally good news,
yeah,
right?
That's a pretty
That's a pretty movement to get out of there. I think a lot that goes missing is the effort behind the scenes by persons working these command centers and persons who are working these shelters. It's a great sacrifice, and those people need to be commended for their efforts pre, during, and after these storms.
Absolutely.
I just want to say something, Nicole, because I know that in West Grand Bahama, the district and council people, they said that some of the pictures that were being circulated were not true pictures. So we have to be very careful, and I do admonish the public, please either put a time stamp or date stamp on the photos so that we can know that those are authenticated and now happening, because it's very critical to see these pictures, and if those are false pictures or from a previous storm, you know, that's just going to heighten the anxiety of the communities. And so we have to be very responsible in posting pictures. Yes, the pictures will help us in terms of weather to see what's going on, and we can adjust. And I'm sure others would want to know what's happening, but we have to be responsible in posting.
And you know, I don't understand for the life of me why persons would consider doing something like that when these things are so serious and life-threatening. We don't want to create a panic. We don't want to create a scare. We want to make sure that the information that gets out there is as accurate as possible. And so please refrain from doing that. We call them deep fake photos. We saw that during Hurricane Dorian. We saw people sending photos with sharks floating in the water, just creating an unnecessary scare for so many residents, and we don't want to do that.
No.
There's thousands of people on different islands with a focus on Grand Bahama as to how their relatives and friends are.
Yes.
And so to put those videos out there that are false, it doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation at all.
Absolutely. Grand Bahama will soon be under the radar of this storm. We want to talk a little bit more about the kind of conditions. We talked about West End. We know that the 8 Mile Rock area, normally there's a flooding that takes place as you enter into 8 Mile Rock. But what about Queens Cove?
Well, from all indications and for some of the emergency persons that went out there, the water had started to overtop the canal areas in Queens Cove, and there were just minor flooding along the roadways in Queens Cove. But I have no doubt that the levels will rise just a little bit more because soon the wind should start to more or less shift from that north and northeast component to a more west and southwest and then eventually south component. So that will sort of allow the water that did come in to start to go back out to the north coast. So with regard to Queens Cove, I do anticipate a little bit more flooding in that area, but hopefully the level will start to stabilize once the wind shifts.
Peter, we talked earlier about Queens Cove and mentioned that it used to be a high-end area. You couldn't even get in the back there without checking in with security, but now it's a little bit more vacant and seems to be a hurricane zone. Nobody wants to live in the back there anymore. But as of late, it seems as though the area isn't as bad as it used to be. What do you say to that?
I think the diehards will tell you it's still a high-end area, those persons who refuse to move from there, but it's always been a question mark whenever a hurricane comes to Grand Bahama. Queens Cove, it remains vulnerable with flooding in particular. You can only hope that those residents either got out of there or they've taken the protective measures over the many years. I see the construction has changed. While less people live there, those persons that still live there have really done a fine job in improving the structures of those homes to take on hurricanes when they come. But it's still one of the finer communities in Grand Bahama, but far less people live there now.
Absolutely, and you mentioned the constructing. And I have had the opportunity to go in the back there recently, and I saw some of the homes, I saw some of the upgrades, elevated off the ground. Most of them are now being elevated off the ground, which I imagine a lot of persons in Grand Bahama are taking that same stance when it comes to rebuilding their homes.
Yeah, and last I heard there was a challenge with insurance companies even wanting to insure homes back there.
In the Queens Cove area?
Yeah, I hope that's not the case, but they have improved the construction there. But, when you pass Queens Cove, now you're coming in, the priority is saving lives.
Absolutely.
But second and apart from that, again, I go into the economy. And so you want the best for the container port, those businesses in the 8 Mile Rock community, the Friendship Shopping Center where that government complex is under construction. There's a junior high school in Holmes Rock.
Absolutely.
You just want the best for those properties, separate and apart from the #1 priority in saving lives. And so again, we're calling on Nicole to really behave herself and just touch and go and get out of here.
Touch and go. We got hashtag that. But the airport, an area of concern every hurricane. What is happening at the airport right now, and what can we expect when this storm hits Grand Bahama?
I have not heard any report of any flooding on the air side, but then of course the airport is closed, so maybe there's no one out there surveying.
Right.
But much like Queens Cove or even in West End, the water coming in, that will tend to accumulate along the north side of the runway. And with the continuous onshore push of that water, I will more than likely believe that there should be some breach of the runway itself. Whether or not the water makes it all the way to the terminal is to be determined. But I think because I know that the area is very, very flat, that water should have gotten there at least very near the runway.
I was just about to ask, to what extent do you think the water will actually come inland from the north?
Well, it's starting to more or less switch to a more northeast component, and then it will eventually go to east, which will be very helpful for the airport area.
Okay.
So the more the center comes to the west, the more the winds will start to go more east on one side on the north coast and west on the south coast. So that will be good because you have now water going parallel to the coast rather than onshore toward the land. So, but once Nicole starts to move further to the west, toward the West End area, we will have that now south push of water, which will start to impact the south coast. And so we don't want to leave out the south road in 8 Mile Rock,
8
that
Mile Rock.
coastal road there, and we don't want to leave out the Pinless Point and Hunters area.
Right.
Because I do anticipate some kind of water breaching those roads. The coastal flooding should be minor on that side, but with the system Ian passing last month,
right.
we had some debris coming out of the water because of the strong waves, and especially during high tide, that compromise those roads, so we want to not leave those out as well.
Absolutely.
Huntsville is literally a creek.
Yeah.
So, there's potential flooding and damage there.
Absolutely.
But God knows we need the airport to be okay. I mean, we've had a temporary airport since Francis and Jane. And you think of the wonderful job that Rexroad has done with Western Air.
And, currently rebuilding and near completion.
Near completion. So, yeah.
We have a comment in from Cecily Munnings on the Facebook said, I don't think you want Nicole to touch. Maybe just go.
Well, she's already at landfall. She's already touched.
She's touched already.
She's touched already.
But you mentioned the Southern District just now, and I do know we had the opportunity to go there earlier today, and so I want the producers to get that story ready. But heading further north on past the airport to the bridge, the Lucaya Service Company Limited, Lusco, wants to advise the motoring public that due to the impending tropical storm Nicole and to provide an alternative means of access to the eastern end of the island, the Casuarina Bridge will be temporarily opened as of today, Wednesday, November 9th. The bridge will reclose once Tropical Storm Nicole passes. Motorists are reminded that the bridge closure was to ensure the safety of the workers while bridge repairs were being conducted. Construction work has been suspended until the storm and the all clear is given, and temporary opening of the Casuarina Bridge will provide ease of access to the eastern island properties during the passage of Tropical Storm Nicole. So that's an update from Lusco, just letting persons know that the Casuarina Bridge is temporarily opened until the all clear is given. But like I mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to go into the Southern District. We're going to take a quick break, and when we have that story, when we come back, we'll play that story for you. But I want to thank you for tuning into our live coverage as we continue to track Nicole as it heads over to Grand Bahama and out of the Bahamas. But stay tuned. When we come back, we'll have that story.
Hey guys, it's that time of year again, the Atlantic hurricane season. Are you ready? Here's another ZNS hurricane readiness tip to help you prepare. Your roof is one of the most important parts of your home to prepare for a hurricane. Antonio Miller addresses the idea that a roof is only good for 20 years and tells us what to do to get the roof storm ready.
If you have a roof that is more than 20 years old, it's highly unlikely that the whole structure is going to be given away at the same time. You should be able to identify whatever weak spots that are in your roof. May that be shingles missing because of past winds, past storms. May it be drip cap rusting.
This has been another ZNS hurricane readiness tip to prepare you for the storm.
When a hurricane watch or warning has been issued, it is extremely important to be prepared and know just what to do. Stay informed about the storm's path by listening to the radio or television for hurricane progress reports. Check emergency food and household supplies. Be sure you have extra batteries for flashlights and radios. Bring in outdoor items like lawn furniture and garden tools. Anchor objects that cannot be brought inside. Secure buildings by closing and boarding up windows. Remove outside antennas and satellite dishes. Turn refrigerators and freezers to the coldest settings, opening only when absolutely necessary and closing quickly. Purchase ice and store it in an ice chest. Keep drinking water in clean jugs and bottles. Clean your bathtub with bleach and fill it with water for washing and flushing, not for drinking, making sure to keep the bathroom door closed so that small children cannot access the filled tub. Do not go out to videotape or take photos of the storm. Take pictures from inside where it is safe and dry. There is no harm in being overly cautious where a hurricane is concerned. It is truly better to be safe than sorry. This public service announcement has been brought to you by the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas in conjunction with the National Emergency Management Agency.
Accidents and emergencies are not scheduled life events. When they occur, people are usually caught off guard. It is important during these times, however, to bring certain items with you when you or your relative present to the Accident and Emergency Department. The following items will assist healthcare providers with your specific case: identification, photo ID for registration purposes. Examples include your driver's license, national insurance card, or passport. If you were admitted to hospital prior to your emergency, discharge summary or most recent discharge letter with relevant information regarding prior diagnoses and treatment. The referral letter from the healthcare provider who would have sent you to the emergency department. All your medications and pills prescribed, herbal, or any over-the-counter medication is required. Have a list of all allergies, insurance card when necessary, emergency contact information, an interpreter for foreign nationals when necessary. Bring comfort items, change of clothing, books, iPads, blankets. Bring a list of questions for the medical providers. And of course, bring patience. Having these items on hand can help to minimize anxiety and frustration during your A&E visit. Remember, the best person to manage your health is you.
This is where it happens. Those moments that impact our lives. Giving you the information that you need this hurricane season. Wherever there is news, we're there.
Welcome back. If you are just tuning in, you are watching our live broadcast of Nicole in the north, and we've been covering this storm since it started, or since we were under this tropical storm threat. And joining me live in studio now is officials from the Bahamas Air, Sea, and Rescue Association, Captain Devon Archer and Jason Aubrey. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. I know hurricanes is something that you guys are familiar with, and you are the ones that are out there rescuing and saving lives in the event of the emergency. Just kind of give persons, we'll start with Devon, your role when it comes to hurricanes and how you prevent or save lives.
For us, our role is really, as soon as we get a call that a life is in danger, we put our crew together and we head out to that location to get them. Jason here is in charge of the hurricane department for Basra. So he would have already organized jet skis and vehicles, fuel, and all the necessary tools we would need to be out there and have a successful mission.
Jason, just go a little bit into your role in mobilizing your equipment to get persons in the event that they need to be rescued.
Yeah, so just basically, like Devon said, having assets in place, jet skis, boats, heavy equipment, loaders, big trucks that could be able to maneuver through flooded waters 3 to 4 feet deep. And then also working along with the police, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and the fire brigade as well. Sometimes they have to stand down for certain reasons, but we still can go out and maneuver and do what we need to do to save lives. Once the calls come through NEMA, with the emergency contact numbers, they contact us, and then we go out and do what we need to do.
And what is most, I wouldn't say interesting, but it is interesting about your role is that you leave your families, you go out there in the event that somebody needs to be rescued. And so it is a selfless job. that you guys are doing. But I do recall in times past, you know, when you talk about mobilizing equipment, some challenges were presented in terms of when the water was in certain areas you were unable to get through. What have you learned from past storms, and like Dorian, for example, that you now do differently in future storms and like this one here today?
I think you have to learn, you know, obviously the topography of the island and know where to stage equipment,
right.
How to maneuver around the roads, which areas you could go from which areas you can't go. So we have staged certain equipment in different places on the island so that we know we can get to it because it's on higher ground. And that's just basically all that you can do, and just, like I say, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But when there's a life in danger, you just have to go get it done.
And that's in any condition, or do you wait until, you know, the storm settles a little bit, or you go out there in the thick of it?
Yeah, in Dorian, I think we were experiencing up to 200-mile-an-hour winds,
yes.
And we had teams out there saving people during that kind of weather.
Wow. Walk me through that experience. Hopefully we don't ever have something like that again, but walk me through that experience. What was that like for you? Was it like the first time you've ever experienced something like that?
No, I think we've been doing it now pretty much a long time, over 20 years for sure, both Devon and myself, and a few other guys that we had out there. But, I mean, you can't really prepare for it, but you just set your heart to it, and obviously you know, because we're on a small island, you know certain people, you have family and friends that are out there as well, and when you get the call that it's certain people, you just, you know, buckle down and you have to go and get them.
Devon, you could kind of weigh in on that. I know that you're someone who's been doing this for a long time as well. What was that experience like for you during Dorian?
Really and truly, you don't think about, you know, the experience or what you're going through at the moment. You just have your mind set on, we got lives to save, we need to get out there, we need to do it. To be honest with you, it did not hit me until everything was over.
Wow.
And I thought about it, and I was like, wow, you know, people up in their roofs, on top of the ceiling, on top of the roof itself. And it didn't dawn on me until later on really what I had gone through.
Wow.
Because when, you know, it's that adrenaline kicked in, and you're only focused on saving lives.
And now here we are in the thick of another storm, or getting prepared to handle possibly a low Category 1 storm. What is the preparation like now for when this storm hits Grand Bahama?
For us, we've had meetings. We discuss what we need and what we have to do. We put all of our tools and our persons in different places, our equipment. And really right now we are just on standby, ready to move. In the event of phone systems going down, we have backup with radios and satellite phones to still be able to communicate and know where we're going, what we're doing, what we're up against, who we're going for, what equipment's going to be used, and so forth. So it's really all about preparing and prepping, the same way you would for any hurricane coming, you know, bottled water, a first aid kit, and necessities that you would need, canned food and stuff. Well, it's the same for us, except ours is based on saving lives. So we're not worrying about the water and the food, but we're worrying about the equipment, the tools, the fuel, the persons involved, who do we have on standby, what department. We have, you have boaters, you have jet skis, you have heavy equipment operators, you have airplanes that are in the States waiting for a phone call that if we need them, once they can fly safely. Right. So we have the equipment lined up.
We spoke yesterday, and we touched briefly on the fisheries aspect of it, and a lot of fishermen kind of like these adverse weather systems because, as they mentioned, that it's good for their particular seasons. What advice would you have for boaters and fishermen who, you know, may attempt to go out in the storm or be the first on the scene to be able to pick up those lobsters and things that come inshore after this storm? What advice do you have for that? Do you even, you know?
I don't condone it. I understand what they're trying to say. I do know that bad weather does bring in lobsters and pushes them into shore and so forth. But until the all clear is actually given by the Met Office and NEMA that it is safe to be out there, is when I would ask you to go out there. No time before. Because what you're doing now is you're putting yourself at risk, your vessel, and any rescuers that have to come and get you. One thing is, as Bahamians, what I've observed with us is we get used to human life, normalcy, and what we do is we take it for granted, and we say, oh yeah, I've been out in a boat thousands of times, so I've been from point A to point B, I do this all the time. I could do this with my eyes closed, and you take it for granted. And those same persons that have been out there thousands of times, it only takes one time where you break down or you don't have the right equipment and you're just out there drifting or you're fighting for your life. So let's just, we gotta think, and we gotta acknowledge Mother Nature and allow her to do her thing and, respect it. And once she's finished and done, we continue on.
Absolutely. It sounded like you were speaking from experience. Has that ever been the case where you've had to actually go out after a storm and rescue a fisherman? Or?
I have been out after a storm, and I've been out during a storm. The during the storm is not one I want to do again. Right. But if I have to, I have to. But yes, I have done both. I'm not I guess you don't really think about it because you're only thinking about how many people I got out there and I need to get them home safely. Right. But, it can be a little mind-boggling of why you even went out there knowing the conditions which you're faced with. Right.
We want to touch a little bit on East Grand Bahama, and you mentioned in your preparations. We do know that persons have taken advantage of going into the shelters, but some persons have decided to remain. In your preparation, do you have an idea of how many persons are where and who those persons are in the event that you may have to go into those areas?
We would get that information from NEMA. Okay. If we get a call from the ER that we need to get out there or there's something going on, we will then know who, how many, what location, what conditions, and so forth. But yes, you are correct. There are some people who choose to remain home, right. And those that go to the shelter, we don't get that updated list because it's a living list. Right. So in the event of that time would come for us, then NEMA would notify us. Well, we had X amount of people in this house. 3 of them went to the shelter. There's only 7 more left. Right. So you're looking for 7 persons, something like that. But we don't get a constant updated list. And we do understand that some persons choose to remain home in the comfort of their own home. We understand it. We may not necessarily agree with it in the sense of if you have had a bad history in that area before. Right. Or we also need to now open up our eyes and be aware that Dorian was not one of the storms that we have always, or we used to. It was a little extra. Right. So now we also have learned that, we should have learned that there are other areas that now can flood what never used to flood before. Exactly.
And I think that's the most shocking thing of Dorian, to know inland, more in the center of Freeport, we had water. And that's something that I think a lot of persons have never experienced. Correct. And caught a lot of people off guard and created a panic because Freeport is only north-south. It's right there, So that's important to know. But stay indoors. That is the charge coming from the various government agencies at the Emergency Operations Center. Now, the press conference, which was held earlier today, the Minister for Grand Bahama, the Honorable Ginger Moxie, leading the meeting, noting they found it very important for the relative agencies to update Grand Bahama residents on the later with Tropical Storm Nicole. Also updating on the 15 shelters around the island is Officer in Charge of Social Services, Dorothea Gomez. The Ministry of Works diving into concerns as well that they have for the western end of the island.
What we want the residents to do is to remain indoors. because we need you to stay safe. We know that there's so many other reports out there, but again, we want you to listen to the update from the EOC and the relevant agencies so that you're apprised of what's going on.
The shelters are as follows. Christ the King, that is the special needs shelter, and as of this morning, we have 12 persons at that shelter. Maurice Bois, as was stated earlier, which is the shelter for the eastern end of the island, there are 38 persons at that shelter. Church of God, Central Church of God, has 7 persons, 7 shelterees there. Shiloh, Seventh-day Adventist, also has 7 shelterees. Outreach Temple, we have no shelterees there at this time. Revelation Apostolic, we have 7 shelterees there. Calvary Temple, there are no shelterees at this time. First Baptist, we have a total of 3 shelterees. Because the western area, they did not report to the shelter, we found it necessary to just use at this time Bethel Deliverance, but we stand ready to reopen the other shelters as the need arises.
We have been closely monitoring the system that is out there and that is upon us. We are concerned for the West Grand Bahama District at this time, and we are preparing to mobilize first into the west once the all clear is given by the Grand Bahama Met Department. We are also working furiously and in collaboration with the Grand Bahama Power Company and the Grand Bahama Utility Company, as we will also be carrying out our re-energizing exercise in that district that is currently without power. We stand ready to do what we have to do as we carry out our initial situational overview once Hurricane Nicole has passed.
Now again, those emergency numbers given by Island Administrator Joe Ferguson are 351-4902-4. For anyone wanting to reach the Emergency Operations Center, you can contact 348-108-1080 or 348-1085. For search and rescue, you can call 727-5671. We're still here with our guests. Before we go to our next report, word of advice for anyone that is being advised to stay indoors, that may be experiencing some challenges after the winds pick up. What do you tell those persons who are being advised to stay indoors?
Yeah, I think indoors is the best place to be. Obviously, if you're experiencing some emergency, I think from what I see, I think the storm should be past us by 8, 9 o'clock, heading off from West End. I think we will experience some portion of the eye, so be diligent about that and not think that the storm is past. But if you do need assistance, definitely, if there's an emergency, definitely reach out and call.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. I know that you're very busy and you have to be on guard in the event of an emergency. Now, with the major concern being West End, our Aja Quant is live on the ground where she says some flooding has begun.
Well, guys, it's definitely getting intense here in West End. The tide is rising, the winds are intensifying, and the rain has now ceased, but it is definitely coming in intervals. When I tell you it looks like it's about to flood here in West End in a matter of minutes, it is. As you can see behind me, you can even pass through to get into West End even more. Right now, we are located at the front of Chicken Nest building, and this is the furthest we can go. Now, this is a little different than 8 Mile Rock. 8 Mile Rock was a little bit more on the quiet end. Now, there are no residents out here. There is no vehicular movement. And of course, if you look right here to the left of me as my camera pan to the right, the waves are increasing. Now, this is not usual because Nicole is entering from the east side of Grand Bahama, and this is the west. This area will be the last you will feel Nicole. And so I'm definitely concerned for what is going to happen in this area. We do have some residents standing on their porches, just looking at the ocean as it makes its way into their settlement. Of course, our ZNet News team, we're here on the ground. We have all of the latest in tracking Nicole, and we will definitely keep you updated. But for now, for the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition, I'm Adra Quant. Back to you in studio.
Wow, Asha, thank you so much for that report, and continue to remain safe out there. We're going to continue our live coverage as we continue to track Tropical Storm Nicole, and we want to thank you for all of you that are watching in and staying tuned with us. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we will have some more guests, and we will keep you updated as to the current movements of this storm. Stay tuned. You're watching Nicole in the North.
Hey guys, it's that time of year again, the Atlantic hurricane season. Are you ready? Here's another ZNS hurricane readiness tip to help you prepare. Edward Albury, Vice President with responsibility for claims at J.S. Johnson, clarifies whether hurricane insurance is available all the time.
There's no really restriction to purchase hurricane insurance. The one thing that I would say is that if there is a named peril out there, if the weather persons have told us that there is a named event and it's going to affect us within 2 or 3 days, the insurance companies normally put out a moratorium, meaning that you're not able to purchase insurance until that event passes, and then you can get the insurance. So our advice is that look at your policies now and make those adjustments now while everything is quiet and clear. So even during the hurricane season, you can still, like right now, you can get the insurance. But if they say, well, Daniel is going to affect us in the next 2 or 3 days, then the insurance companies put out the moratorium. The basis for that is the premium that you pay goes into a pool, right? And everybody pays a premium into the pool to meet the losses of the few. So if you just try to jump in at the last minute, you're not really putting any money into the pool, and we may have to pay for a total loss of your house. So hence the reason for putting out a moratorium just before an event is upon us.
This has been another ZNS hurricane readiness tip to prepare you for the storm.
Here, these for you. These must have got false bottom, because they look empty to me.
Not for long. You taking us shopping right now.
For what?
Things you're gonna need in case you can't get out of your house after a natural disaster.
We know when we had one hurricane around here.
That's it. We get too lax. It ain't only hurricane, we gotta worry about, we could have tsunami, or we could have earthquake. And they don't give you no time to go shopping.
What kind of earthquake?
Scientists just find one faulty line over there by my corner. And even though they say it's stationary, it's there. So we need to go and get our survival kit.
Like what?
What you mean, like what? Plastic bag to put your important papers in, like water, medication, flashlight, radio, canned goods, things you need, things you might need, just in case you can't get out of your house after a natural disaster. These 2 plastic containers, the two of them could paint them up in their special colors so they could know what they're looking for when you send them to look for it.
That's one thing I like about you. You always ready.
Hey guys, it's that time of year again, the Atlantic hurricane season. Are you ready? Here's another ZNS hurricane readiness tip to help you prepare. Your roof is one of the most important parts of your home to prepare for a hurricane. Antonio Miller addresses the idea that a roof is only good for 20 years and tells us what to do to get the roof storm ready.
If you have a roof that is more than 20 years old, it's highly unlikely that the whole structure is going to be given away at the same time. You should be able to identify whatever weak spots that are in your roof. May that be shingles missing because of past winds, past storms. May it be drip cap rusting.
This has been another ZNS Hurricane Readiness Tip to prepare you for the storm.
Coverage of Nicole in the north. I am joined now by my co-host once again, Peter Adderley, and First Vice President of the Grand Bahama Christian Council, Pastor Elvis Burrows. There's a song that says, if there's ever a time I need you, Lord, it is now. As this storm approaches Grand Bahama, just kind of give us an idea of what the Christian Council role is whenever we come under threat from these storms.
Thank you so much, Ramiko, and thank you for having me today. I bring greetings on behalf of my president, Pastor Ken Lewis, who could not be here today, but he does send his regrets, and also to remind you and your team, and you guys are doing a really good job in keeping the Bahamas updated, and he wants me to let you know that his prayers are with you and the team.
Thank you.
And of course, the Bahamas at large as we go through this time of testing. One of the things we need to remember is that the Christian Council has always been in the forefront when it comes to disasters or to times of trouble in Grand Bahama, in the country at large. And if we go back to Hurricane Dorian and also during the pandemic, we are always there as a first responder, as one of those essential groups that is ready to work with the government and the other governmental agencies. And as you know, even at this very moment, our assets, our church buildings, are being used as shelters for those who want to evacuate their homes. Our pastors and our church members and the leadership are there to provide prayer support for people who are out there on the front line, like yourself and the rest of your team, and the first responders, those government agencies who have to work while many of us are at home, and also the persons who work those institutions and those organizations like the power company and the water company and all the rest of those. And I commend you for the guests you've had on in the last few days. Well, last night in particular, particularly last night, and with Ricardo, you guys have done a good job in bringing the news to us. But the church has always been there. And not just between June and November. The church is there year-round. You know, all through the year, we are providing emotional support, spiritual support, physical support. But during times of hurricanes, we get more hands on deck to make sure that we are meeting those needs. But we are always ready to provide whatever the needs are and to work alongside the other agencies that are providing the kind of support that our people need to get through these rough and tough times.
We talk about the physical aspect and the things that we see, and not much about the things that we don't see, which is of faith and our spiritual walk. And we know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Tell us how important is it to have faith in these times of turmoil, as some would put it, or when we come under these types of threat? How important is it to have faith that the God who brought us to it is able to bring us through it?
Well, Miko, I'm glad you said that. For a moment, I said if I need a preacher, you seem to be someone I could call on. you have your scriptures down pat. You know, there's a passage in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, beginning in verse 1, I think 2 and 3, it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you pass through the floods, they will not overflow you, and when you go through the fire, it will not burn you, nor the flame set you ablaze. And then the writer ends by saying, because I am your God, I am with you. And so faith begins by believing, number one, that God exists and that God will do what he has promised in his word to do. That is where it begins. And we move and we live and we have our being in him. So if we believe that God exists and God is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, then we have to believe that God can get us through what we are going through, because it says, even though we go through the valleys and the shadow of death, he is with us. And during the break, Peter and I were talking about when Jesus was on the boat, and he said, I don't know how people can sleep during the times of hurricane. I said, unless they have the mindset and the faith like Christ. But the rest of us, you know, we go through that anxious mode. And during the times of hurricane, we do see an elevated kind of anxiety. You know, just a rain shower could drive some people into an emotional setback, a mental setback, because if you've been through it, then you understand. You know, he who feels it knows it. But our faith is the thing that gets us through these tough times, knowing that God will see us through. And see, this is a category 1, right? God has brought us through category 6 as Dorian, category 4, 5 like Matthew, and some of the other categories. God doesn't deal in categories. You know, he's the same powerful God. Night and day are the same to him. And so, you know, Nicole has become a household name over the last couple of days, but the name of Christ, the name of Jesus is a household name every day for the church. And so we in the church are encouraging our folks to continue to not let their faith fail during these testing times, but to go back to the sermons they have heard, go back to the word they have been reading, and to know that, you know, when all else fails, God is with us. And we have a track record. We have a good track record of how God has brought us through over the years. And so we can depend on him in these times, Romiko.
Absolutely. We have this great number of people. They know it's an annual event. It's going to be hurricane season. They're fortunate enough to go to the U.S. or stock up right at home, so their cupboards are loaded with sardines and corned beef, and you know they're prepared.
Yes.
And then we have that downtrodden constituency who practically and literally lives day to day. So they don't have, you know, the plywood set or shutters and all the rest of it. What is the balance with the church on the have-nots and being faith-based?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because, you know, when Jesus was here and Judas said, you know, oh, that those monies could have been used to help the poor, and Jesus said we would always have the have-nots with us. And the church understands that. That is why, you know, amidst the spiritual program that the church offers, there has always been a social aspect to our ministry. And I guarantee you there are many of our churches that feed people every day. They have pantries, they give finance, they give vouchers to the folks. And so our church understands. The church understands that there are those who will always be on the fringes, the disadvantaged, the disenfranchised. And so our ministries are geared to them, not just during hurricane season, but January, February, March, April, all the way through the year. We are ever more aware that there are those among us, and the church is always ready to reach out to them. And many of our churches do that. Now, I'll say this much. We don't always call you guys when we are doing our alms. Right. You know, you give some folks a plate of food, or you give them a gift card to go to the food store. We don't call you to, you know, to take some photograph, the photo. To do that. And I would put this piece in now. That is why we encourage folks, if you are not a part of a faith community, we encourage you to become a part of a faith community, to become a part of a church, so that when hard times come, you have a family, an extended family, where you can reach out, who you can reach out to, or who can reach out to you on short notice, and to meet those needs that you may be going through. So the church has always been there. And if you go back to the book of Acts, at the very inception of the church age, the folks sold lands and they brought the monies to the disciples' feet and they distributed the monies to the widows and the rest of that. I don't know if he's calling us to sell our houses and our business, but the avenue or the means by which we reach to those who don't have, our members give. They donate, they pay tithes, they pay offering. And so there is meat in the storehouse. Right. And he said, bring ye those funds into the storehouse that when a hurricane comes, when a parishioner falls on hard time, but not just a parishioner, anyone who falls on hard time, because we are all men and women made in the image of God, and I may be doing well today, but I don't know what tomorrow holds. Absolutely. And we see that during Dorian. And so we're here for that.
A caller on the line from Cat Island, Cyril Thurston, who I believe may have a question for you. Cyril, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead. You have a comment for our guest?
Okay. Yes. All right. Yes. There I am.
Cyril, can you turn your TV down just a bit? We're getting a little bit of feedback.
All right.
Turn your TV down just a bit. We're getting a little bit of feedback. Turn your TV down just a bit. We're getting a little bit of feedback.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. You see the pastor. The pastor, he is a man of God. All right? The words he speaks is the words of truth. So, like the people with around, God is doing these things for the world to understand and realize that he's coming soon. He is coming soon. And these storms and hurricanes that he put out, it is be like where the nation need to come together and go down their knees and pray. And they have to pray. That's the only way they'll understand and realize that he's a man, don't play, and he has evil of passion if you go on your knees. You see what I'm saying? Once you have the passion to give them the understanding and know and realize that he is a man of no integrity, that he don't even play when it comes down to saving lives, because he is the creator of all life. But the world has to understand that.
Thank you so much for your comment, Thurston. And thank you for calling in. That was Cyril Thurston calling in from Cat Island, admonishing Bahamians to pray and talking about that God is a protector, and admonishing Bahamians mostly to pray. And how important is it as a pastor for us to have that relationship with God, to be able to communicate with him and pray and get that connection just for ourselves. A lot of persons may feel as though, you know, I don't know how to pray, I don't know what to say, I don't know where to begin. But here you have it now, one of, you know, our very own encouraging persons to pray.
Yeah, and I want to commend the caller from Cat Island, and I'm very familiar with Cat Island. I went to school in Cat Island. I know Cat Island well. I grew up in Orange Creek, so I know the island well, and I commend the caller for what he says. See, I believe sometimes we as the church, we complicate prayer. Prayer is not complicated. And some people may say, I can't pray, but I guarantee you, if your child is sick, you will learn to pray quickly. Your spouse is going through challenges, or you yourself are going through some challenges, you will learn to pray very quickly. And that is one of the reasons I said earlier, it's important for us to connect with the community of faith. So if you need someone to come alongside you, and sometimes we do need others, you know, because you know and I know there are times when we go through deep mental and emotional struggle, through grief and pain and hurt. Imagine losing a loved one tragically, and you have to deal with that on your own. It's not easy. So having a church community that can surround you and to pray you through that. I believe in prayer. I know what prayer can do. Prayer is an important aspect of the church life. The church began by prayer. Jesus told them, look, you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit shall come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and all of Samaria. And then he asked them to tarry. They went to the upper room and they prayed. And that was the genesis of the church. And so prayer is the engine that drives the church. I believe it was Martin Luther or one of them who said, for the child of God who does not pray, that person really needs to ask him or herself, am I really a child of God? Prayer is the air in the lungs, if I can make that analogy. So without prayer, the church is nothing more than a social club. And so I commend the gentleman who called, and the church do pray. As a matter of fact, I listened to some prayers on the Facebook page today. Yesterday morning when we learned that the hurricane was coming, I'm just saying this because we're talking about prayer. I mobilized my folks at church to let's pray. Not just for Central Zion, but to pray for, the Bahamas, for Abaco. I have friends and parishioners and, Zionites in Abaco, and my daughter is the police in Abaco. And so we prayed for Abaco, we prayed for Grand Bahama, we prayed for you guys who are out there. We prayed for our police and the rest of those. So prayer is an integral part of the church, and without prayer, we're nothing more than a social club.
We're going to go ahead and hashtag that. Without prayer, we're nothing more than a social club. I like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a relationship between the church or the Christian Council and by extension the Department of Social Services in times like this or year-round?
I would say year-round, because there are times when folks come to us with needs that are beyond our ability to deal with. And so there are times when we have to refer some folks to the social service that we just can't deal with because we don't have the resources all the time. Remember now, for most of us at church, we don't get subventions from governments. We don't play the numbers or the rest of that. So we depend on the free will offerings from our members. And as you know, that those offerings come on a weekly basis. So sometimes we can't meet the need. But we do work very closely with the social service. As a matter of fact, I want to commend the various agencies of the government, especially in preparing for the hurricanes. They really made sure the shelters were up to date, the shelters were ready to go, and sometimes it's easy for us to sit back and to criticize, but we don't always know the process by which we arrive at the end product. And so I want to commend them for the work, but yes, Peter, we are there to work alongside the various government agencies, and that was highlighted even more during Hurricane Dorian. The church had become a feeding station. We fed this community, but beyond that, Ramiko, I will say this much: the church not only provides the physical or the shelters or the food or this. The church is also a place where folks can come to have their mental needs, their emotional needs met through counseling. And we've always been that group that offers counseling to the church. And we have a captive audience every week. Folks don't have to make a 2-3 weeks appointment. They knock on our doors. And we are there for them, week in and week out. Are we doing all that we can do? I'm sure there's some opportunities for growth. We are mere humans with shortcomings, and we have more work to do. But as a church, and I'm not speaking about a piece of real estate with a steeple and a sign out front. I'm talking about those who have been called out by God, redeemed by his Son, Jesus Christ, and are empowered by his Holy Spirit, the church universal, those who are called out by God. See, the church exists whether we had a building or not.
Right.
Whether we had assets or real estate or not, we are the church. And so, you may not be a Baptist. I hope you are.
Okay.
You may not be a Baptist, but if I reach out to you, you can't say, my church did not reach out to me. I am the church.
Got you. Absolutely.
And so we have to bear that in mind. And so let me add something else before you come back, if I may. I know we often talk about how resilient we are in Grand Bahama. And I know Peter and I were talking earlier, and I said, man, and I spoke to my wife today, and I said I've been in Grand Bahama about 45 years. And I don't recall hurricanes in the first 25 years I spent in Grand Bahama. I think it was maybe beginning in 1999 with Floyd, it might have been. And ever since, we were being hit by hurricanes year in and year out. And we get up, we get back on our feet, and we get back to work, and we rebuild. And they say, boy, the Grand Bahamians are resilient.
Resilient people.
But what I believe, I believe our resiliency is rooted in our relationship with God. And those who are able to show greater resiliency, I believe, are those ones who have an intimate, close relationship with God. Because yes, we may be able to weather some storm, but there are some storms that we can only weather if our resiliency is rooted in our relationship with God. Other than that, we may run into problems.
Absolutely.
We serve a God that does no wrong. How do you explain to our listening public the trail of devastation that comes with hurricanes?
You know, Peter, you're taking me into the Pacific Ocean and some deep waters, because that has been one of the questions of evil from way back. St. Augustine and some of the other, Thomas Aquinas, and some of the great fathers of the church discussed that issue, the whole problem of evil. But you see, evil began way in the Garden of Eden. And when we veered off track from what God had ordained for us, we set the stage for evil. And while what we're going through was never God's ideal, but because of sin, because of corruption, and sometimes because of our own doing, we encounter some of these, I would say, disasters and other things, but it's never God's will. It's not God's ideal, but part of it, maybe not all of it, is because the earth doesn't even function the way it ought to function anymore. And it's no accident that our prime minister is in Egypt at COP27 talking about climate change. And so we have not been very, very responsible with our environment. I'll give you one example. I was walking through Bahama. I live in Bahama. I was walking through Bahama. My wife and I go for walks. And I was horrified after a fire and to see the number of bottles thrown beside the roads. And I would say, wow, we don't take care of the environment. We don't take care of our surroundings. And so when all of these things come together and we marry that with the sin problem, we can, if we are not careful, we can easily attribute some of the evil to God, but God cannot do evil. He's not that kind of God. He's ultimately infinitely good. And so, but that's a debate that has been going on for years, the whole thing of evil and where does God fit in it, but God is not the author of evil. We have a real enemy that we fight every day, and I think you know, you mentioned that earlier, we fight not against flesh and blood.
Absolutely.
You know?
We know that it is nearing the 4 o'clock hour, and I do remember that the chief meteorologist mentioned that around 4 o'clock, Grand Bahama will begin to experience more impact from this storm. The Queenstown will begin to experience that, and we do know, I think she's still out there, and at the Met office, we'll have a 4 o'clock update, according to the meteorologist. But today, our ZNS Northern Service team was on the ground in the extremely early this morning, speaking with residents and reporting on the conditions throughout the island. Earlier today, I visited the Southern District to speak firsthand with residents, and here's what they told me.
We are currently in the Southern District of Freeport, and to be more specific, the Pindus Point area, just to kind of give you an idea of what the weather condition is like at this present moment. It is about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we came out just to get a sense of what the weather conditions is like in the Pindus Point area. But right now, we can see that the winds are beginning to pick up and the weather conditions are beginning to deteriorate. But right now, I can tell you that on the shoreline, that the water levels are beginning to rise, and so that may be a concern for residents generally in the Pindus Point area.
That's the problem over there with the storm created last time, right? And that's what it looked like when it done damage. So we had 3 houses over there, and all get smashed up by the wave and the rocks, and all them come across the road last year. Damage it all up just like that.
Well, this one is not very sound. Like, this one is not a very seriously one. Like a Hurricane Wilma, I went through that. And Hurricane Wilma, we watched the water was coming, my brother and I, but we didn't know we had to leave from the back of here. So we just stayed out here, but as the water keep coming and coming, after it gets so high, we went in, my 2 children and my husband, we went in the manhole. But after the water keep coming so high, so we had to run for shelter. So, but this storm here sounds like this not going to be a very serious one. But I just wanted to bottle up my 2 windows in the front because the windows are very thin. So I said, let me just bottle those 2 out.
I'm here with Gabby Grant, another resident of the Pindus Point area who has faced many storms in this area before. Tell us, what is the fear and concerns anytime the hurricane season approaches for residents in this area?
The main concern is usually just property damage because, you know, when things kind to get a little extreme, we all kind of leave. So it's really just property damage. You know, a lot of people out here, this is their one and only home. You know, you could always go to family and stuff, but at the end of the day, you know, when you leave your home to come back to see it damaged or sometimes even gone, you know, it's just stressful.
But that's not a concern this time around for this particular storm?
No, it's not a big concern. I mean, you know, it's windy, so maybe your roof might, you know, kind of get messed up, but that's a simple fix, so yeah.
Why did you decide to stay?
We're actually not staying, but we haven't left yet because, you know, there's still last minute things to do. My family has a restaurant, so we're trying to stay open, you know, as long as possible, you know, to make, you know, a few more extra dollars just in case we'd have to go ahead and fix things due to the storm and the wind and stuff.
That is the current conditions in the Pindus Point area as of 8 o'clock this morning. And so we will continue to pay close attention to what this storm does. For the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition, I'm Ramiko Knowles.
That was the Southern District as of 8 o'clock this morning. I imagine that it is not like that any longer. Those conditions may have perhaps worsened. And we were talking about that earlier and some of the flooding that is expected to take place with the chief meteorologist in that area. And some residents, as you saw, were still battening up their homes at that time. And it shows that, you know, a lot of persons, I wouldn't say wait until the last minute, but, you know, things happen and a lot of persons got caught off guard. And we assisted in helping some persons in that area batten up their homes, but that was one resident who said they're not staying. You know, that was just one, but most of the persons in that area are actually still staying.
It's always a tough decision, you know. I think the older we get, the more creature of habit we become. You never want to leave your own personal space in your surroundings. For a lot of people, regardless to their station in life, they prefer to be at home than to be in a shelter, in a basketball gym, or in a church. And so it's always a difficult decision. And then, you know, I guess in the final analysis, it's life, protection of property, life, protection of property. And I think Dorian has taught us that maybe it's best to evacuate, but some of us are still stubborn. We want to be at home.
Do you think it's time? I mean, we've had this conversation before about implementing mandatory evacuations, and it hasn't come into effect as yet, but do you think it's time for that to happen?
I was under the impression that the legislation had passed, but perhaps it hasn't, but it's on the table. Right. I mean, it's there. You know, if I can force you to wear your seatbelt to save your life, I guess I can force you to get out a coastal-driven area to save your life, and I have no problems with it at all.
Pastor, we have to wrap in just a few moments, but for those of the persons who are watching, at 4 o'clock, Grand Bahama will be under the radar as it relates to this storm. Any final words?
Yeah, I want to say to folks in Grand Bahama, number one, to obey the instructions of the experts. You know, tune into the right station, tune into ZNS. We know you guys are the official government entity. You know, listen to the meteorologist, listen to those who have the facts. Don't believe everything you see on Facebook and the rest of that, but to make sure you're getting the correct information, to obey the instructions, to stay inside until the all clear is given by the authorities and we are back to normal. I want to say to those who know the virtue of prayer, as our Grammy used to say, to continue to pray for God's protection, you know, as we ride this storm out. And as I think Peter might have said, or the meteorologist earlier, it may be a Cat 1, but sometimes there are tornadoes in these hurricanes that can cause irreparable damages in seconds. And so I want to encourage us to not take it for granted, but to follow the rules and listen to those in authority. And finally, I would like to say to those, the rest of us out there, we've done so much preparation. We bought the food, we gas up our vehicles, we put shutters on the homes and everything else, and I commend our people for that. But I want to challenge us to not only prepare physically, but to prepare to meet thy God. Because I would end with this. It's a terrible thing to meet death before you meet God. And I'll end with that.
Doesn't get more profound than that. And I really want to commend Grand Bahama Christian Council, the work you do and the entire team does. And in times like these, I mean, we make light of situation, Nicole, touch and go, and the rest of it. But at the very core of our being is God.
Yes.
And this show, if we end it now, there would be no greater importance than the value of prayer, the presence of God, and our clear understanding of who our Maker is. And just really want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you both for joining us on this show today. And I'm going to let you go home to your families. We may call you back tonight. But I want to thank all of our guests for joining us here today as we track Nicole here in the north. But that brings us to the end of this show. We just got a message in for... I just got a message in from Siobhan. We understand that at this present moment, Grand Bahama is experiencing heavy rain bands are moving across central and west Grand Bahama, containing strong wind gusts, and she's advising persons to stay indoors. For the next couple of hours, we will be going through the west side of the center, which will consist of lots of rain and wind. And so that is the latest from the chief meteorologist, Siobhan Bonamy. So right now, once again, Grand Bahama, heavy rain bands are moving across central and west Grand Bahama, containing strong wind gusts, and she's advising persons to stay indoors for the next couple of hours. We will be going through the west side of the center, which will consist of lots of rain and wind. And that will bring us to the end of our show here in the north, but we can ask that you continue to watch. We will be back and we will continue our extensive coverage at 8 o'clock tonight, and we will have more updates for you as it relates to Nicole in the north, and I'm going to send it back to you in studio in Nassau. But I want to thank all of my guests and all of you that were tuning in with us. From the entire news team here in the north, I'm Ramiko Knowles. Have a blessed and wonderful afternoon, and we do pray that you all stay safe.
You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
This Birding Adventures episode is powered by Nikon, your world leader in optics since 1917.
Welcome to another episode of Nikon's Birding Adventures TV. We've just